Dear police officers of Reddit, have you ever responded to a call for paranormal reasons? My uncle works for dispatch in my town and he recently told my family of the weirdest call he's ever gotten. He says that he had received a call from a landline one night and when he answered it there was only static on the other end. This happened 2 more times. Finally he calls a squad to go check out the address from the caller ID. When the cops got there and walked into the house they immediately saw that there was a dead body. The person had been dead for 5 months. The craziest part about it was that there was no electricity or any other utility working. So there is no way they should have been able to get those calls into dispatch. But if they hadn't, who knows how long that person's body would have stayed there. Not my call, but my dad served for 25 years. Wasn't really a ghost story but I think it's worth telling. One night he gets a call from a woman who says her neighbor has made a pact with the devil. The woman calling is about 35 and a religious wacko. The neighbor called about is about 75 at the time. My dad went over and knocked on the door, and the old lady answers, all happy, nice place decorated the same way for the past 50 years. She invites my dad in without even asking why he came, makes him some coffee, and asks how his day was. Naturally at this point my dad is wondering what the heck the call was about, but it came clear soon. At some point my dad realizes he isn't the only person she is talking to, and that she thinks her apartment is full of people. My dad thanks her for the coffee and she tells him to come back any time. The whole time she was talking he was writing down the names of the people she was talking to, and does some research on her when he gets back. Turns out she was talking to family members, who were all dead. She had a daughter, 3 sons, a brother and a husband. All dead, and she had no family, and no friends. She hadn't spoken to another person in years, her groceries were delivered and she rarely left her apartment. Over the next 19 years my dad took care of her. My sister and I came over all the time and just sat and talked with her. She even taught me how to cook. Over the years she stabilized and stopped talking to her dead relatives, she just needed people to live with. She actually lived till she was 94 and died in the guest room of my parents' house since it had become harder to take care of her from a distance as she got closer to the end. She was like a grandma for us. TL, Dr. Nut called about devil contacting old lady turned into great part of my whole family life and one of few moments that make me think humanity can be good. Not me, but my dad was a cop for 32 years. This was one of his craziest calls. A call goes out for reported screaming. It's mid-January, important later, my father and another officer respond to find a known deranged individual, very long rap sheet and has been in and out of psychiatric care for years, sitting on the front porch holding a double-sided wood-splitting axe. Steam is coming up off the grass and there are chunks lying all over the lawn. Upon interviewing the suspect he admits that he and a friend were playing poker. The suspect was losing nearly every hand and came to the conclusion that his friend was a haint, Southern for ghost, and was cheating him. The suspect grabbed the axe and chased his friend outside and hacked him into dozens of pieces, thus causing the warm blood to create steam on the grass. My dad tells the suspect that he needs to get in the police car because it's haint-proof. He said the suspect dropped the axe and sprinted to get in the back seat while thanking them for helping him. TL, Doctor, my father convinced an axe murder to get in his cop car because it's ghost-proof. Holy SHT, got my first Reddit gold. I'm gonna go retire in Guatemala. I was called to a job at night where the informant said there were firearms being shot in the area, semi-rural. Nothing strange at first glance. Searched the general area and found nothing, so approached the informant. She was a middle-aged hippie. She proceeded to tell me that a UFO had landed a couple of properties over and she saw aliens shooting laser guns at cattle. I smiled, doffed and left. Worked as a police officer in a small town in rural Nebraska. Back in the 90s, I was patrolling through town in winter. We had several abandoned houses in town, but one seemed to have the attraction of copper thieves, so we were told to keep an eye on it. Drove by it around 7:00 OP. Since it sat on a corner lot, I had a clear view of all 4 sides of the house. As I drove around the corner, nothing looks out of the ordinary. About 2 hours later I drive by again and the back door is wide open. I know that the back door was not open when I drove by it earlier. Looking at the snow on the ground around the house, there were no footprints. So I think, what the hell? Call dispatch, tell them I'm investigating an open door at that address and ask for a county sheriff to start my way. I walk to the open door, pull out my flashlight and shine it inside. The house has obviously been gutted for the most part. The plaster walls have been torn down, debris piles everywhere. Since there were no footprints in the snow around the door other than mine, and with all the dust on the floor not showing any footprints, I chalk it up to the wind or maybe the door just opened on its own. I was about to secure the door when I heard a loud thump come from upstairs and what sounded like kids laughing. So I enter the house and yell out, "Police department, come downstairs." More of what sounds like kids playing. I tell dispatch that it sounds like there are kids in the house and start making my way through the kitchen into the living room where the stairs are. All the while cautiously checking the main floor. 2 more times I hear something upstairs, but since I've had no response, I start thinking maybe it's an animal. Still, I hear what I'd swear was kids laughing. I head upstairs and it all gets quiet. The upstairs is relatively small with a hallway at the top of the stairs that has 1 bedroom on the right, 1 straight ahead at the end of the hall, and a bedroom on the left. As I get to the top of the stairs, I hear a thump in the bedroom to the left. I carefully peek around the door and it's an empty room with a small pile of plaster and wood debris in the middle. No kidding, sitting on top of the pile of debris was a page torn out of a child's book with a picture of a police officer on it. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I got out of that room, quickly cleared the other rooms upstairs and got the duck out of there. Told dispatch nobody was in the house, locked the back door and never went back in there again. I am not a cop, but 3 years ago our very elderly next door neighbor died suddenly in her house. They found her body 5 days later in the kitchen. Fast forward to last summer. I'm sitting in my house watching a movie and all of a sudden about 8 police cars come out of nowhere, sirens blaring, lights on, and most park in that empty house. Some park in my driveway, so I went outside to see what was up. A police officer went through the quick formalities and asked if I had seen anything strange in the past 5 minutes. I replied no and rather hesitantly asked what was going on. He said that the police department received a call from the house and when the operator picked up the line went dead. I stayed at a friend's that night. When I was in high school, the days before cell phones were common, my friends were to come over to pick me up from my house one night. We had made plans at school for them to pick me up at 7 p.m. At 6, my parents said I had to come with them to do something, and I totally forgot to call my friends and tell them. They came to my house at 7 p.m. and called the house phone. No one answered. There was 4 of them in the car. They all told us the exact same story. They said that they were about to pull out of my driveway, but they saw someone peek through the blinds from the bedroom on the top floor right. That was my room, so they assumed that I was ducking around. 5 more times, they said that someone would peek through the blinds, and a couple of them said they even saw the person's eyes. We got home at probably 7:10 to 7:15, and they were still in our driveway. One of my friends came over and said they thought I was messing with them. Then they asked me, "So, who's staying in your room?" I told them that no one. So they asked, "Who's home at your house right now?" Again, I told them, "No one." Their stone-cold faces then told me what they had seen repeatedly over the last 15 minutes. At first, we all thought there was a burglar in the house or something, so we called the cops. They came over and inspected the house. There was 0 signs of break-in, nothing was touched and nothing was stolen. Our house had an alarm on it, so there is no way someone could have come into the house without setting off the alarm. My family, my friends, and the cop all kind of stood around for a few minutes, trying to make sense of the situation. My friends swore up and down, and still do, that they couldn't have imagined what they saw. All 4 of them saw the same things, and it wasn't particularly a dark night, so their eyes wouldn't be playing tricks on them. To this day, None of us can make sense of the situation. Edit, I know this isn't what the thread asked, but it is quite relevant, and I wanted to share this explainable thing that happened in my life. The cop also played a pretty big role, because he too was dumbfounded. At first he thought my friends were ducking around, but there was no joy in their face throughout the entire thing. They were confused and at times, terrified. Called to a residence out in the boonies. This was in Wyoming, so the boonies are really the boonies, at about 11 p.m. about suspicious activity. When we get there, we are told by the family living there that there are very strange screams coming from a creek area about 1,000 feet out. And sure enough, waiting outside on the porch with them for about a minute, I hear it. It is very hard to describe what it sounded like. It was like a woman in very severe distress, but higher pitched, and each scream lasted for about 10 to 15 seconds. It never sounded like it was saying anything, it just sounded like a cry of sheer terror. And it repeated again. We tell the family we are going to investigate, so we just walk down to the creek since it was nice out. We hear about 2 more screams, getting louder as we approach the creek. By now, we're both kind of freaked out. There are 2 possibilities: someone is getting murdered/maimed in the creek bed, or it's a wild animal. As we approach the creek bed, we hear no screams for about 5 minutes. We search around and find nothing, yelling at the top of our lungs for somebody to come towards if they are there. Then, we hear the exact same scream behind us, exactly from where we came from. We get about halfway back to the house, and the scream comes so loudly it seems to be right next to us. We frantically shine our flashlights everywhere and find nothing, no eye glints of animals, no rustling of bushes, just silence. We trace our steps back, and the scream comes from around the creek again. This time, it lasted about 30 seconds and was much louder than before. Our retreat becomes a little more hastened. By this time we were both scared shitless and verified with the family to call us again if they heard it. They never called again, and we got the hell out of there. I still don't know what it was. As an avid outdoorsman, I know no animal makes a cry like that, especially one that can move stealthily without being spotted by flashlights. Something else that weirded me out was that it was completely silent while the screams were happening. During summer in Wyoming, there is always some type of ambient animal sounds, frogs croaking, crickets chirping, owls hooting, coyotes howling, etc., but there was nothing. Until we were leaving and the screams had stopped. Then a frog started croaking. It gives me the creeps just thinking about it still. Yes, actually, really fucking weird. Back when I was working as a cop on a military base, I loved working night shift. Didn't deal with 99% of the bullshit that day shift dealt with, and what little stuff we did deal with was usually really interesting. Well, most every building on the base is alarmed and the alarms are tied right into the desk so we know the instant they go off. When we get an alarm activation, we close the base, and go check the building, pull on all the doors, see if we can get in. If we can, we go into the building and secure it, check all the doors and corners to see if someone set the alarm off. Well, one night I was on patrol with my alpha partner, and we get called to respond to an alarm activation at the elementary school. So we go, secure building, and call in that the building is all secure. No problem, keep patrolling. So about 15 to 20 minutes go by and we get another alarm activation. We get back out there and check, and now there is a maintenance door open that leads into a boiler room-ish thing. Nothing in it, we close it, lock it and get out. Another 20 minutes. And another alarm. We respond, all the doors are still locked and we can't get in, maintenance door is locked. Call in the all clear. This time my buddy and I sit on opposite sides of the school and watch to see if someone is coming and yanking the doors real hard to set the alarm off. We sit there and watch, nothing happens, and right as we're about to leave, another alarm activation as we're sitting there. We inform the desk that we'd like the building manager on site to help us secure the interior and to let us in. This is like now 3 a.m. Building custodian shows up and we start doing a walkthrough, checking all the classrooms and checking all the maintenance rooms, and that's when we see one of the maintenance doors open with the lights on in the room. Now this room is literally the size of a closet. We walk down there and look in, no one's in it and the door is locked when it closes. We look in there and we find a single footprint of a bare foot made of water, left foot as a recall, of a small child. Freaked the living hell out of us because no one reported a missing child and the entire building was clear and still locked up. No one left, no one entered, and we checked every inch of that damn place, literally a 3-hour deep sweep including ceiling tiles. Freaked the ever-loving SHT out of us, and to this day, my partner refuses to go into that school. Speaking of which, schools are really ducking spooky when they're empty. Posted this story a while back. Hope you like it. 100% true. I was a 911 dispatcher for about 5 years out of school. One night I got a call from a lady at a residence in town. 911, what is your emergency? Is this the police? She breathed. She was freaking out. Heavy breathing, scared, shaking voice. I've taken many calls like this, and from the sound of her voice, this was not going to be a routine call. I sat up straight and my heart started to pump faster. Yes, Mom, what is your emergency? There's someone in my house. She trailed off, very breathy and genuine, but not loud and freaking out. Okay, are you located at house address? Yes, I dispatch the cars to start heading over to the address, and I don't give a reason yet. Okay, do you know who this person is? Well, no I don't. I think it's... I know this sounds so crazy. I think that there's a ghost in my house. She begins to sob and sound so ducking scared. There's noises and I know there is a ghost right in the other room. I can hear it right now. At this time, the sergeant asks me the reason of the call and why I sent him and 2 other cars without explanation. Normally you'd send 1 car to something like that. It's suspicious activity. I told him what activity. He demanded over the radio, a fair question. Sir, the caller is claiming there is someone in the house and she believes it to be a ghost. Silence on the air for about a minute. 3:50 is all he said. By the time they got there, the ghost was gone and the poor lady was a freaked out mess, and she kept apologizing for calling us, but it was real, she kept repeating. The officers later told me that her sincerity actually freaked them out a lot, and when they searched the house, guns drawn, even they were scared. Ghost to Ghost AM with Art Bell, 1993. I collect old Art Bell shows, and the Ghost to Ghost AM episodes are my favorite. I don't remember how good this one is, but there's probably a very good chance you'll hear a couple of true ghost stories from police officers, paramedics, firemen, etc. For those of you that don't know what Ghost to Ghost AM is, every Halloween Art Bell would do open lines, and you were only allowed to call if you had a true ghost story to tell. Some good ones, some lame ones. Are they true? Nah, probably not. But it's an enjoyable listen if you suspend disbelief. Edit, seems there are some people out there that mentioning Art Bell strikes a chord with. I sent a few PMs in case any of them so far are interested, but it might just be easier to do this for all the veteran coasters out there. My collection of C2 cam with Art Bell is pretty respectable, and it is something I am willing to share with anyone interested. If you think you might like some old school C2C, send me a PM, and we'll see if there's a way for me to send you some. Mails, peer-to-peer, whatever. Security count? I worked the control room at a museum. Some of our facilities included a Civil War-era church and a former home for displaced war widows. A lot of it is circumstantial at best, older cameras, poorly installed sensors, but when you work the night shift, there are only 4 people on shift, and you consistently get different alarms that are only centered on those 2 buildings and statistic images of something. You start to wonder if it's just the equipment. Police officer here. One evening about 8 years ago it was pouring outside and we got a call from an elderly woman. Seems to be a common theme in this thread. She called in and said that she was hearing footsteps in her house and she thought there was a ghost inside because she regularly heard the sound of someone walking upstairs, but she lived alone. We went just to check it out and make sure that everything was okay. She stayed on the line with the 911 operator because she was frightened. About 3 minutes after she initially called in, she said that there was actually a man standing outside in her backyard, staring at her through her sliding glass door. Petrified, the woman froze in that spot and continued to stare directly at the man. For the next minute or two she said that he was just standing there, still as could be, staring at her. Eventually the man slunk off out of sight. When we arrived, about 12 minutes after the call first came in, we went to the front door. I remained in the foyer with the woman and the other officer went to the backyard to see if the man was still hiding out or if there were any traces of him. I spoke with her for several minutes until the other officer returned. He said there was no trace of anyone having been in the backyard. We set off to do a quick sweep before we left to make sure the house was all clear. In her living room, the room that has the sliding glass door, we discovered a trail of mud and footprints inside the house. I asked the woman if she had been outside at all that day or if anyone had been over to visit her. She said no, that she lived alone, and that no one had come by to visit. The woman was very old, probably around 85, and had very poor eyesight and was hard of hearing, as elderly people tend to be. The woman obviously had seen the man's reflection and mistakenly thought he was in front of her, on the other side of the glass, in her backyard. In reality, he had been standing only a few feet behind her in the same room while she had been talking to 911. Nothing was stolen, broken, or out of place, so we don't know what his intentions were. Who knows what would have happened had she not stayed on the line with the operator. I know it sounds like something out of a campfire story, but it was honestly one of the most unnerving and creepy experiences I have had while on duty. TL, Doctor, responded to a call where an old woman thought there was a ghost in her house. She ended up seeing a man through her sliding glass door leading to her backyard. When we arrived we discovered footprints indicating that the man had actually been inside of her house and she had been looking at his reflection in the sliding glass door. Not me, but my mom is an animal humane officer and my dad a cop. My mom got a call of a wild animal in an old woman's house. She went and this old lady is standing in a chair and pointing at her couch saying there are pink rhinos ducking on it and she wants them out and the couch set out by the curb. So my mom pretends to Soho the rhinos out and the lady finds some men to carry this couch and set it by the road. Later that night my dad got a call she wanted him to shoot the rhinos outside trying to get in. Edit. My highest rated comment involves pink rhinos ducking. I love you guys Reddit. I was doing security at a hospital with ER, ICU, surgical, the whole works, and I got called to several paranormal calls. Most were psych cases or paranoid people that heard a strange noise. This time more than one nurse saw a guy on the camera who was on his death's bed, a guy who kept saying I will not die in a hospital earlier that day, literally push his curtain aside and walk out of his room toward the elevator. A code was called and everyone immediately posted at their designated locations. Within seconds there were people watching the elevators and stairs and security started combing the area and investigating. As I reached the ICU floor I spoke with the lead nurse and she told me several of the nurses saw him leave. At that moment monitors started going off, the guy never left, the guy went code blue and died right then. There were 3 witnesses on the report that say he got up and left and were serious enough to call a code which could cost them their jobs if they were wrong. The bosses wouldn't let us watch the video but the looks on their faces said it all. The bosses said the nurses did the right thing and some things just can't be explained. The portion of the video I was allowed to see did show that nobody had left via elevator or stairs. Florida police officer here. I had an older lady call that she was trapped in her house. When I arrived I observed a white powder poured out in a half circle in front of her door. I knocked. She spoke through a nearby window. She explained that a voodoo priest had put a hex on her and trapped her in the house. She claimed that if she crossed over the powder, her back would break. I told her to sit on her couch and wait, I would be back soon. I went to a store where I knew the clerk. I borrowed a bucket and broom. Returning to the lady's house, I filled the bucket from a garden hose. While saying the Lord's Prayer loud enough for her to hear inside, swept and rinsed the powder away. I then told her it was safe. She opened the door and asked what I had done. I told her I had gone to a church for holy water and had a priest bless the broom. She was so happy, she hugged me for a long time. I got the name and location of the voodoo priest from her. I was able to find him later in my shift. I got in his face and told him if he bothered that lady again I'd kick his ass and take him to jail. We will not allow harassment, scamming or preying on the elderly. Navy Security Forces member here. This will probably get buried but oh well. I was on shift with a DoD police officer on the oldest Navy base we have in the States. We get a call about an alarm going off in a nearby office and it being midnight. We quickly get over there. When we get to the building there are lights on in the second story. We try all the doors and they are locked, try the windows locked, look for any possible entryway and everything is sealed up tight. We call the building commander and they send a guy to come and turn off the alarm and let us look around to make sure all is well. When he got there his first statement to us was, "Alarm going off again. Damn it, I'm sick of that ghost ducking my days off up." Apparently everyone that works in that building has claimed there is a ghost that likes to move stuff around and cause the alarm to go, and a check of the call log for the alarm activation showed that every time it went off, the building was locked up tight. One time I called the cops. I was getting ready for bed and turned off all the light and the TV, shut the windows and headed for the hallway which was still lit. As soon as I seen just the Jesus part of our hanging crucifix laying on the floor face down, the blinds in the windows started going crazy even though the windows were shut. I was a little shaken and decided not to go to bed until I could calm down, so I turned the TV back on. Just static and the volume was turned all the way up. Now I was in full-on panic attack mode because I couldn't get the TV to shut off. I dialed 911. "What's your emergency?" "I'm not sure, can you just send someone over to make sure no one has broken into my house?" I felt horrible for bothering them. After they assured me I was alone, I asked one of the officers to pick Jesus up off the floor and put him back. He did. They ended up sticking around and just talking with me to calm me down while I waited for a friend to come spend the night. I always respected law enforcement, but that night I realized just how helpful some of them are, even when the situation is as small as mine was. Wherever you two are now, which I assume is still Anoka County, thank you. Grandmother was a cop in Santa Maria in the late 70s till early 90s. Man calls in saying there is a 7 feet gray man at his door. She goes to check it out, door is jammed. The man is screaming and she hears a loud buzzard. She slams the door open and the buzz is gone and so is the man. There's blood everywhere. She calls for backup and runs around and calls his name. She hears what sounds like someone yelling, but someone is covering their mouth. She finds him tied up, piss everywhere. Investigators say that he was in that room for at least 4 hours. Man lives alone in the middle of nowhere. Says he called the police 5 hours ago. Said that a cop was on their way. He reported seeing a 7 feet gray man with big eyes who did that to him. No footprints, no trace of any kind of invasion. My grandmother lost 4 hours somehow. The guy ended up killing himself a few years later, leaving a note behind, warning my grandmother that they are after him, and thanking her for rescuing him. SHTS ducking crazy. This isn't what you're looking for, but this scared the living hell out of me every time I think about it. One night I was talking with my friend's mom. She was telling me about why she could never in a million years live in a trailer. Here's her story. I was about 5 years old and my parents moved us out into this trailer on about 2 or 3 acres of land. My room was at the far end of the house next to my sister's and was only about 20 yards away from the forest. Anyway, on a few nights I kept hearing a scratching sound, almost like nails on a chalkboard, so I woke up my dad and he came in and verified that I was bat-SHT crazy and went back to bed. This went on for about 2 or 3 weeks until one night I was listening to the scratching when it suddenly stopped and my toy chest started moving away from the wall. I ran down the hall and got my dad, and he reluctantly came to my room to check it out. When he flipped on the light, he saw a woman's head, looking like a crazy Gene Wilder, sticking through my wall where my toy chest used to be. She screamed at the top of her lungs, not like she was scared but like she was trying to scare him, and proceeded to pull at the trailer wall and try to crawl through the hole. He locked the door and called 911. The cops came out and arrested the woman, who was stuck halfway in the wall and cut all over the place. She had apparently escaped a mental facility 4 miles away and had decided to burrow into the house at night. TL, Dr. Crazy Woman scratches her way into a trailer and gets arrested. Had a buddy of mine who was a cop. They actually used to listen to a paranormal show over their graveyard shift. He said one night him and his partner were listening and the topic was black-eyed kids and people were calling in with their stories. Of course, about 10 minutes into the segment, they get a call from dispatch about a neighbor complaining about some teenagers asking to get into their house who were wearing hoodies and dark clothes, the standard black-eyed kid mo. They both looked at each other like, no way in hell, and responded that they were already on a call and hightailed out of the neighborhood. My dad is a police officer and he was called to an old castle-like house on the outskirts of town. The man who called was telling him about his daughter who was acting strange. She was talking in a deep voice and speaking in swear words and high-level vocabulary. She was only 10 or so, and being all around creepy. My dad said, "I think you need an exorcist," and left that house immediately. He's been a police officer for 12 years and he says that was the most scared he's been, and he's seen people who have blown their brains out with a shotgun and people decapitated by a train. Way late to the party, but I'll add my story. I have only been a police officer for 2 years now. I would not say that I am a firm believer in ghosts, but I have no explanation for what happened on this night. This wasn't a call I was responding to, but I was just driving around and observed a vehicle parked alone in the middle of a church parking lot. This was at night, so I figured maybe some kids were doing whatever kids do, right? So I pull up on the car from the side and see that no one is inside the vehicle. I then position my car behind it so I can run the plate. Maybe someone stole it and dumped it in the parking lot. So I start to run the plate and I look at the car through the back window, and I kid you not, there was a person in the front seat looking at me through the rearview mirror. This is something you notice as a cop, because when you do traffic stops you can tell how intently someone is really watching you inside your car and possibly if they are going to try something. So I get an OSHT moment of I didn't see there were people inside the car and drive up directly next to it to reassure what I saw. And there was no one inside the car. Chills immediately ran down my back and I noped the duck out of there. The car was later gone, don't know what happened. Don't exactly know what I saw. But I was pretty freaked out. Me and my partners used to sit at the church on quiet nights because it is tucked away and you can just relax. I have not sat there since.